Hey guys, it's Adam from Premium Poker Tools, and in this video I'm going to give you an overview of the hit calculator. So yeah, this one is going to be more of an overview. I'm going to make some future videos that actually will review hands and kind of show you how to study with this tool, but in this video it's just going to kind of show you what it does and how it works. So again, kind of like my other videos, it's kind of easier to show you than to tell you. So let's see what happens when we click like Jack 8 suited and we simulate. So first it's going to simulate to the flop, then the turn, then the river, but immediately we can see how Jack 8 suited hits the flop. So it tells us that Jack 8 suited makes two pair 2.03% of the time. It makes three of a kind 1.33% of the time. It makes top pair with a weak kicker 10.18% of the time. Yeah, so what's going on here is we're seeing how Jack 8 suited hits the flop. And if we want to see how it hits the turn, we click this, and we can see that it makes, by the turn, it makes two pair 3.5% of the time. And then if we want to see the river, we can see it makes two pair 4.87% of the time. So we can see how a hand hits the board. And we can also see how a range hits the board. So let's say that we're opening like the top 30% of our hands. We can see how this range hits the board. So we simulate and we can see that on the flop, we're going to make an overpair 3.3% of the time. We're going to make top pair, top kicker 2.86% of the time. We're going to have a flush draw 4.8% of the time. So first we saw how a hand hits the board. Now we're seeing how a range hits the board. And this works multi-way as well. So if we have two ranges, like let's say that we're against two opponents and we want to see how they each hit the board, we can kind of set a range for each of them and then simulate. And the simulation is going to go a little bit slower because it's two opponents, but watch what happens. So we see how often our first opponent hits the board, and then we're going to see how often our second opponent hits the board. So we have numbers for each of them. And again, it works for the flop, turn, and river. And the real cool thing is this table right here. So it's going to tell us that, both opponents missed the board 37.5% of the time on the flop. It's going to tell us that one opponent hits 47% of the time, and 15% of the time we have both opponents hitting. So, and it does this for flop, turn, and river. So this table right here really gives you some cool information about, how the entirety of your opponents are hitting the board. So yeah, by clicking add player, you can see how things happen multi-way. And to my knowledge, other apps like Flopzilla and whatever, they don't give you this information here. So this is something that's pretty unique to Premium Poker Tools. So let's back up for a second. We saw that by clicking add player, we see that it works multi-way, but let's just go back to one player, and I want to show you how it works post-flop. So let's say that we're in a spot where we open, our opponent calls, we think they're calling with this kind of a range, they're 3-betting this stuff right here, and let's say the board comes queen 7-6. So we simulate and we see how our opponent hits this board. So previously we didn't enter board cards, and it told us how the range hits like all possible boards, but now we're getting to see how the range hits this specific board. So you can imagine if you want to c-bet, you can see, can I bluff them profitably? So that's kind of getting into what we have here and what we have here. So that's a big reason why you want to use the hit calculator. You want to maybe see if you can bluff your opponent profitably. So what you could do if you want to check that out, you can say, like, I think that they're continuing with their weak pairs. I think they're continuing with their gut shots. You click off what you think they're continuing with. And then it's going to tell you, based off of what you clicked, 46% of hands hit the flop. And then from there, this table is going to tell you kind of what bet sizes would be profitable for you as a bluff. So like if you bet half pot, that needs to work a third of the time. And here, they're continuing 46%. That means that they're folding 54%, and 54 is more than the 33% you need. But if they're continuing with this range versus a 2x pot bluff, well, now it's only working 54, but you need it to work 66. So now it's not profitable. So that's what this table is kind of telling you. And, just to be kind of, just to clarify that a little bit, these numbers are the immediately profitable break-even percentages. So you need the half pot to work 33 if you want it to be immediately profitable. And that means that we're not taking into account our outs or any future fold equity we have. So once we take that into account, we actually might need more like 25 or 20%. And that's what this tool right here is going to help you with. This tool is going to help you figure out what the true break-even percentage is. Okay, so we went over this section here. It also works for bluff raising. And we went over this hit percentage thing. And we saw that it works multi-way with multiple players. We saw that it works post-flop when you set the board cards. If you want to enter in your whole cards, you can do that. So like let's say that you have 8-7 of spades. That will just kind of do some card removal. You see that pocket sevens, there's only one combo now. So you can do that, simulate and get a little bit more of a precise kind of answer. Another thing that you can do is you can either look at it in percentages or combos. So here we have, it's saying that on the flop, we're making top pair, top kicker 3.93% of the time. If you want, you can go to combos and you can see that 12 out of the 305 combos are going to be top pair, top kicker. And then if we go to the turn, let's say, 8.4 out of the 137 combos are going to be top pair, top kicker. So, sometimes people like percentages, sometimes they like combos. So I give you both options here. Another cool thing is that if you're trying to figure out, like, what are they going to continue with and you don't know, you can go up here and this will kind of be like a smart default. So if you think your opponent is tight, you can click this and it's going to kind of set the check boxes to like what a typical tight opponent would do. And it's smart in the sense that it knows what the board is. So it's telling you what a tight opponent will do on queen 7-6 with like two of the same suit. So if this was like 3-3-7, the answer would be different. And it's not that smart. It's like, I wouldn't say it's pretty smart, but it's not like that smart. So you'll probably want to use this as a starting point, and then you can like maybe adjust it. Maybe you think that they are going to continue with pocket pairs under top pair. Okay, so we saw this, and obviously this is just going to clear the checkboxes. Now I want to go into something that's a little bit more, actually, I was going to go into this weight thing, but before I do that, I want to show you what we have here. So once we set the board cards, now we kind of see like two ranges. So here is their range, like their pre-flop range. And if we click this arrow or we kind of go like this, we can switch to what their range is on the flop. So you can see that they're like entering the flop with all of this stuff here, but like 10-5 offsuit, they're not even entering the flop with. So that's kind of grayed out. And you can see in the combos, they're entering the flop with 305 combos. And they're continuing the flop with 100. So, you can see when you hover over these things, it kind of like highlights on the grid. So they're continuing with top pair, top kicker, ace, queen. They're continuing with top pair, good kicker, this stuff over here. But a hand like ace 4 offsuit, that doesn't kind of pass through any of these filters. So they're not continuing the flop with that. So that's not selected. And then if you look at like ace 4 suited, only the diamonds are going to continue because they're only continuing with flush draws. So if we shift click, we can see only the diamonds are continuing. Okay, so that's kind of an important thing. If we set the turn, then we can see their ranges after the turn. But what I want to show you here is what happens when we set the weight. So what we can do is we can say that they're continuing with their nut flush draws, but they're only doing that, like, let's say 30% of the time. And what that's going to do is it's going to set a weight of the nut flush draw hands, because they're only continuing with them 30% of the time. So now you can see that these hands have a weight. So, I mean, they're probably continuing with these 100% of the time. But if you're not sure what they're doing with their gut shots, you can check it off, but you can say, I think they're only continuing 50% of the time. If you're not sure what they're doing with their middle pairs and weak pairs, you can check them off and say 25% of the time. So this kind of lets you think probabilistically instead of thinking in a black and white sense, like they are or they're not continuing with these hands. You can kind of think more in gray, like maybe they're doing it, some percentage of the time. So I think that this is a very powerful feature right here. Okay, so I think that this has been a pretty thorough kind of overview of what you can do with this tool, the hit calculator. I'm going to make some other videos that kind of go over hands, like using the tool, so you can see like how I would use it to study. But in this video, I just kind of wanted to show you what you can do. And the last thing I just want to go over is this right here, create a shareable URL. So what you can do here, like if you're studying this hand, like, you have 8-7 of spades and you want to know whether you should c-bet here. Well, a lot of people like to study on poker forums and stuff, or if you want to study with a friend, what you can do is you click this, and it takes a couple seconds to create, and once you do, you copy and paste, like you send it to your friend, or you paste it in a poker forum or something, and then when your friend clicks the link, they're going to see exactly the same page as you. So I think that this makes it a lot easier to study, and I think that poker is something that you shouldn't just sit in your garage by yourself and study. You should be exchanging ideas with other people, getting their input and stuff, and I think that this feature right here kind of makes that a lot easier. So yeah, that's been an overview of the hit calculator. I hope that made sense. If you have any thoughts or questions or anything like that, my email is azerner3@gmail.com, and thank you guys for watching.